He's got some of the best reactive supers in the game, especially level 1. It really does feel like he does just everything super well, but the main thing I don't see enough people talk about is I think Luke is unironically the best character in the game at slowing the game down. I think he's better at slowing the game down than Guile. Like, if Luke just holds down back, you try and drive rush him and he checks with crouch medium punch, and he threatens level 1s and other stuff the rest of the time. It's so hard to effectively contest this character in a way where the risk reward isn't horrendously against you. He really is just built for everything. So off the top of my head, he just has to be the best for that. He also just clearly does the best in tournament. I think partly because of his simplicity. Like, if you look at top 8s for every tournament ever, there's usually like at least a few Lukes in there. He's relatively simple, so any top player with good fundamentals can pick him up and probably do well with him relatively fast. Faxi, Great, and Burnout. Yeah, that too. I think the single biggest example of this character being good in Burnout is Noah the Prodigy's existence. I think normally, if you play most characters in the game, constantly burning yourself out is objectively terrible. But the stuff you get with Luke is so powerful that if you consistently burn out early, it just means you'll get to use full resources again. So if you think of the game as being played as, let's say I'm playing Dee Jay and I don't want to burn myself out a single time, I might drive rush a few times around. Maybe. I might use 1 or 2 specials. But if you're burning yourself out consistently and then you're not being punished for it, it means you effectively get to abuse a lot of the resources that other characters are hesitant to, and you just get to do it more. With, of course, the best example of this playstyle being Noah the Prodigy. I don't really see anyone else really do it to that extent, but hey, if it works, right? And Luke, of all characters, is built extremely well to actually do that just fine. So, if it works, it works. As for other characters I put up with him, one of the first that comes to mind is Cammy. Her mental stack on offense is either the highest or the second highest in the game, in my opinion. With the next character I'm going to bring up being the other character that has the highest amount of like offensive mental stack they can make you think about. If Cammy just presses forward and mixes between a lot of her extremely quick normals, crouching medium kick, drive rush stuff, all the dive kicks, heavy knuckle, hooligan, and then also like your reaction supers. Ugh. It is extremely difficult to play against this character if she's got you on defense, if the Cammy player is playing smart. On top of that, she's just really solid across the board. Side switch DP makes it really easy to just escape a lot of bad situations, although you can put yourself in the corner if you have to worry about that. But in general, I know Japan puts Cammy really, really high right now, and the more time passes, the more I kind of agree with it. I think she's top 4. I think there's a debate for putting her anywhere from 2 to 4. Because I think Luke is number 1, but I could see her being 2, 3, or 4, really. Her crouching medium punch is one of the best in the game. Yeah, that too. Crouching medium punch is super good. Her low forward pressure is insane. She has some pretty solid defensive options as well. She has a really good long range poke and a standing heavy kick. She can kind of just play at all ranges really effectively and can just ignore a lot of projectiles. So she's good at just forcing a lot of characters to have to play uncomfortably, which if the Cammy player is good at reading people, they can kind of just do whatever they want, it feels like. And yeah, her walk speed is incredible too, for sure. The other character that I would consider to be really up there with overall offensive mental stack they can represent is Dee Jay, of course. I think I put Dee Jay in a similar camp as Cammy, where I feel like I wouldn't say they're the best in the game, but they're like just outside of it. Like you could switch either of these two, and I think that would be completely reasonable. I personally lean towards Cammy being slightly higher, just because there's a larger amount of reps that succeed with her, and there's also just she's a little bit less exploitable than Dee Jay. I think Dee Jay's highs are higher than Cammy's, but he also just has some more exploitable weaknesses, like the fact that a lot of his long range normals are very very weak to DI, and the fact that in burnout he kind of sucks. Now, if you just play to avoid burnout, for the most part, that's not going to be a problem, and Dee Jay is really good at avoiding that. But overall, this character has the best drive rush in the game. Like, drive rush jab is beyond stupid. It's like frame 14 to 16 if your drive rushes are fast, which, ugh, that is extremely hard to react to and just creates all sorts of really gross pressure. Even if you are going to check it, he can just sway instead and just do lots of gross stuff. He can react really effectively to people walking towards him with sway as well. And then you just don't even have to pull the trigger on sway low if you don't see anything. So the sheer amount of things he can make you think about with drive rush sway, with drive rush sobot, drive rush OD sobot, drive rush jab, grab, just all the mix-ups with standing medium punch, and just a bunch of other stuff. I think Dee Jay and Cammy have pretty much unparalleled offensive mental stack pressure. Which you would consider higher, I think varies, because Cammy's is like a lot more traditional, but the amount of things she can represent outside of drive rush is definitely higher than Dee Jay's. But Dee Jay's drive rush game is just a lot scarier, which kind of makes up for it. He has a really good projectile, one of the best DPs in the game. He's really good at winning fireball wars as well. OD fireball is insane. He has really good range, so for the most part, you're able to play a poke game really well. And yeah, Dee Jay is just insane. It's one of the reasons I play him. And yeah, I agree, Slade, that Luke's highs are just so high compared to these two, and his lows are better than some low-tier characters' highs. Yeah, Luke is unquestionably number one. That's so funny that they nerfed him from arguably top 1 to unquestionably top 1. Isn't it funny how that happened? After that, I'd probably put... I lean towards Chun, but it's either Chun or Guile. This is probably my top 5 right now. Guile, we'll just talk about Chun first, though. The main thing about Chun is I think she's the ultimate utility character. This character just has some of the best solutions to throw loops in the game, with like EX lightning kicks out of defense is just insane for stopping throw loops. She has some of the best defense in general with a really good DP, extremely fast buttons, a really good fireball game, extremely good anti-airs. Her walk combined with her pokes makes it to where she absolutely dominates footsies most of the time. She can kind of just like walk at you and press lots of just low mix-ups and threaten like her overhead, which is also one of the best in the game. And you just are going to feel like you're constantly on the back foot fighting against her, unless you can get like punish counter pokes into whatever. So because of that, she also is one of the best fireballs in the game. It's very easy for her to do fireball drive rush followed up for just free follow-ups. Her ability to just control the pace of the game is debatably the highest of the entire cast. But she's like less degenerate than some of the characters above her, which is why I'd probably put her like anywhere of this general range. But if you were to consider Chun number 2 in the game, I honestly wouldn't bat an eye. I feel like all 3 of these characters are around the same good. So it doesn't really matter too much which you would personally put higher. After that, we get to Guile. I think Guile is probably the second best defense in the game overall behind Luke. Obviously, Flash Kick is amazing. Sonic Booms give you a way to just invalidate so many characters. I'd even go so far as to say, outside of Luke, Guile probably invalidates more characters than anyone else in S tier. Sure, he has some losing matchups, but the sheer amount of characters he can just effectively auto-win against at top level if the Guile is playing well enough is enough to just put him really high. He's going to be a character that maybe needs a secondary more than any of the other characters in here, but that's kind of why I put him more towards the bottom. Like, Guile just straight up invalidates a solid chunk of characters. And I wouldn't really say the same is true for, like, Cammy or Dee Jay, for example. Like, Dee Jay, from my perspective, he beats a solid amount of characters, but he doesn't, like, beat them freely. Except for maybe Manon on paper. We might obliterate that character on paper. Maybe. And even then, I'm not so sure. Or like, I think we probably slightly beat Gief, but keyword is slight. Guile just obliterates a fair amount of characters, while also just having solid matchups against a lot of them, the other top tiers as well. Even if he loses still to like JP and like maybe one or two others. Obviously, like Chun, he also has one of the best drive rush fireballs in the game with Sonic Boom drive rush, and it's just with the combination of his overhead with drive rush, his lows, and a bunch of other stuff, he can kind of just approach whenever he wants and control the pace of the game really well. His main problem is that he still has to commit a lot on defense if you get in his face. Flash kick is still really exploitable when it goes wrong, and he has to rely on it more than some of these other characters. And also there are some characters that can situationally beat him in the Fireball War, like JP more than situationally, and Dee Jay sometimes, but it depends on positioning. Let's see, after that, this is hard. I also might reorder some of these over time, so don't necessarily think of all these placements I'm doing as like the end all be all. Think of it more like just a general idea. I kind of want to put Blanka up next, not gonna lie. I think we're gonna have a slight drop off. I feel like all the characters past these 5, in my opinion, have other kinds of weaknesses that make fighting them a little more manageable than these characters. Yeah, from my perspective, these are like the best of the best, and then there's like a very small drop off. Very small. In my opinion, all the characters around A tier have pretty comparable strengths to the top characters, but they're either like slightly more linear, they're a little more exploitable, or other things like that. Which brings us to Blanka, the absolute mix champion. This character has so much nonsense he can do from so many different ranges. He has either the best or the second best level 2 in the game. His footsies game is a lot better than it used to be in previous Street Fighters, since he has a lot of good pokes from long range now. His drive rush options are ridiculous. Blanka Ball and Blanka Chan, combined with him being able to stun the ground, gives him a lot more options than he's ever had before. His sheer ability to mix people up, especially with Blanka Chan and like the side switches, and especially with Lightning Beast added in there too, and his character can get really gross to fight against. To this day, whenever I fight Blankas, I feel like I'm seeing something brand new almost every single time I fight him. The sheer amount of things he can do is a bit overwhelming at times, but he still has... See ya, chump. I don't know why they... Some people are bored, I guess. I'm 1900 MR plus, and I've won tournaments. I don't want to hear it. Anyway, so... Going back to Blanka, the main thing I would say is that he does have a bit of a fireball weakness, which can be exploitable. His defense in the corner is not great outside of his DP. He's particularly vulnerable to safe jumps as well, since safe jumps can deactivate his main DP and then he has to worry about other stuff. He does have a really good reversal in his level 1, but aside from that, he's just the overall mix king, really goofy character. After that is probably Kin or Rashid. I don't know about JP. I feel like the next three characters are like all interchangeable in my eyes, but we'll just like talk about them. Actually, like this is definitely my top 10, but I have no idea what the order is. I wouldn't put JP in B, absolutely not. His strengths are still so high. But pretty much all of these characters are like a really similar quality in my eyes. Yeah, maybe the only character I'd confidently order is like Luca's number 1. The rest of these characters, in my eyes, it's like Luca's number 1. Cammy, DJ, and Chun are like 2 to 4. I think Guile at 5 makes sense to me. And then these next 5 are like genuinely completely interchangeable in my eyes. So we'll just talk about what makes them all good in toe and go from there. I kind of want to put Rashid over Juri as well, not gonna lie. Maybe we'll just go with something like this tentatively. Yeah, I think something like this is probably fine for now. Yeah, we'll move on to Ken. Oh, oops. So Ken got some small nerfs. He has to like time his throw loop more, which means he has to commit more to like threatening throw loop than before. It's also a lot easier to check his drive rush because they extended the hurt box on his jab when he drive rushes. So checking drive rush jab got easier for fighting Ken. The main weakness I think he has that kind of holds him back compared to the characters above him is his overhead pressure is kind of underwhelming. He has a really good overhead canceled out of his command dash, but if you just hold down back against Ken, he doesn't really have any quick options to stop you from doing that, which means that you can kind of force Ken to have to either commit to resources with Jinrai kicks, which you can DI through, or parry if he's being predictable, or even DP through it if he just does light Jinrai. He still has some of the best corner carrying in the game. He's able to force you into the corner from pretty much anywhere if he wants to burn some resources off of almost any conversion. He has solid, but honestly not amazing damage output, utility out the ass, really good fireball game. For the most part, Ken can do everything well, but I feel like the characters above him just do it a little bit better and are just a little more well-rounded with what kind of pressure they can represent. Ken, when he has you in the corner, is a nightmare, but he's become more manageable over time as everyone has gotten better at dealing with his lack of quick overhead outside of like out of the command dash. If you just hold down back and just try and slowly move towards him, that's generally the best way to fight against him, and he's not really the best at stopping you from doing that right now, which is the main thing that I think holds him back. Alright, moving on to JP. So this character is still got some really broken strengths. He has easily the best long-range fireball game in the game, bar none. He's almost like an NRS character, where for the most part, he can kind of just play from any range. He's able to get meaningful conversions off of almost anything ever. He can just like fireball you from full screen and turn that into a super combo. His ability to get good damage from anything, anywhere is pretty much unparalleled. But the Amnesia getting the massive damage reduction combined with his anti-air getting nerfed a lot, it's a lot easier to just put a lot of pressure on JP now, which was his main weakness before, was that if you get in his face, a lot of his buttons are slow. So he just has to worry about you pressuring him a lot more than he used to. And on top of that, they made checking some of his buttons a lot more realistic as well. He still is one of the best drive rush checks in the game with I believe it's crouch. I want to say it's crouching medium punch, where he flicks the cane. I think it's either crouching medium punch or crouching medium kick. I can't remember which. But that one hit with the cane is super good. He's still got incredible fireballs. I think he beats Guile, which is a really nice thing to have. probably still that character's worst matchup. And overall, he's still just able to represent too large a variety of threats from too many different positions. But his weaknesses just hurt a lot more now. Rashid has, along with Blanka, I think the best or second best level 2 in the game overall. Especially since with how quick meter build is in this game, it's not uncommon for Rashid to start a round with 3, level 2 you, and then build up enough meter to level 2 you again in the same round. And how on earth do you beat 2 level 2s? That's, ugh, it's disgusting. He has, in my opinion, the best overhead in the game, which really goes well with his decent drive rush as well. He has some pretty solid damage output, especially off of like DP punishes. His damage output off of a lot of his regular confirms is a bit low though. He can have a hard time dealing with fireballs, and on top of that, he has a lot of stubby buttons. But his offensive mix in the corner is probably the best in the game. Level 2 is absolutely insane. And overall, he's just a really tricky utility character, but he does lose to some of the characters above him for sure. Can have trouble with fireballs. Can have trouble getting outranged. And if he's not able to effectively deploy level 2s, sometimes he can struggle a little bit. Now we end up to the final character in this tier. So Juri is the $1 million character. I don't think she won because she's one of the best. I think she won because Uma just played absolutely incredible. I'm going to give him credit where it's due. But I still think this character is super, super good. She has some of the simplest pressure in the game, but it's excellent. She's able to build up her low fireballs, which are really annoying for a lot of characters to deal with. Super fast DP with long range. She has some of the best drive rush options in the game in general. Drive rush jab, drive rush overhead, drive rush low. All of that is just absolutely fantastic in conjunction with each other. Overall, this character has just got really, really good ability to force people to play on her terms with a lot of offensive pressure. Especially with drive rush fireball, incredible drive rush options in general. She's just pure offense the character while also having some surprisingly solid defense. Her main problems is that she does have to like commit to building up her fireballs, which means that sometimes you can just get in her face while she's trying to do that. On top of that, if you have options that go high, you can just go over her fireballs and smack her sometimes. Her damage output off of her lows is generally not great, and while her longer range pokes are really good, a lot of them you can't actually drive rush cancel, which means she's a little bit vulnerable at longer ranges. Loses to some of those higher options fairly regularly, and she also really struggles with fireball. So good fireball characters can be a nuisance for her, especially Guile. Guile is rough for her at top level. Alright, after that we have a bit of a drop off. So for B tier, let's see. This is the part of the game where I honestly have a lot less confidence. Like top 10, I'm pretty sure it's this in some particular order. Like I'm fairly happy with this top 5, and I'm fairly happy with the next 5, although I think you could reorder them a bit and that would be fine too, but this is just kind of where I feel things are right now. Let's see, after that, this is hard. I think we'll just put characters in like a general order again, where I feel like there's something like, I want to say it's something like this. Actually, we'll add Aki in there too. I think this is bottom 5 right here, and I want to say the next batch of characters is something like this. I think Dhalsim's, I'll put him a little higher than Ryu. You know, we'll go with this actually. Maybe I'm like slightly overselling Ed, but I'm starting to think that this character is very good. Or maybe like the absolute top of mid tier. That's kind of where I feel like he is right now. His ability to play mid-range with flicker, a lot of his long-range pokes, and everything else is really, really annoying to deal with. I think this character's stock is slightly rising over time. I know Momochi in Japan has been absolutely killing it with him recently. I believe he's actually the #1 MR player overall right now, with more Ed starting to see results as well. I know that's... I think Nephew has a secondary Ed for a handful of matchups like Guile and a few others. I don't know if he's going to continue with that, but I've seen more and more Eds slowly starting to pop up and put in work. But he has one of the worst jabs in the game, if not the worst. His damage is really not that impressive for the most part. Despite being a boxer archetype character, his close range game is not that impressive or great, really. He can be a little vulnerable to fireball characters as well because he has to commit a lot more time to fireballs as well. He's able to cancel other characters' fireballs, but like double fireballs and OD fireballs can be really hard for him to deal with. So sometimes he's forced to approach in spaces he'd rather not. So him having some issues with zoners combined with his damage not being that great and his close range not really being that great, especially since his DP is also pretty slow as well, means that he has a lot more exploitable weaknesses than I think the characters above him, but he might be the strongest of this next tier. Maybe. I'm not sure. The more I think about it, I think I'm actually going to switch these two as well. Yeah, which brings us to Dhalsim. So, this is a character that is really weird, and I wish I got to play against him more, because overall, I feel like I don't really get to play this matchup enough to have a really solid opinion of him, but in general, he has the longest range pokes in the game. His fireballs can be kind of annoying. His teleport is super good for just hard reads in general. But this character is so slow. His close range game, because of that, is abysmal. He's really, really bad at just doing grounded microspacing. He kind of has to rely on just pushing buttons in place a lot. His damage output outside of like certain combo starters is usually not that great either. If he gets corner pressure too, it's like good, but it's definitely not as good as a lot of the characters above him. Overall, Dhalsim is at his best when he just doesn't let you near him at all, which is possible, but he's very, very reliant on it, and he gets blown up horrifically up close. He's extremely vulnerable to throw loops as well, so something that he has to worry about a lot. Alright, we get to Marisa. This is the hardest character in this entire section to place, in my opinion. For the simple reason that I think she has the single highest strengths of any of these characters. And honestly, I think her highs are comparable to the characters in S tier, but her lows are absolutely horrendous. She is very much she's probably the single most volatile character in the entire game on paper. When things are going her way, she just has armor moves out the ass. She has really, really long range buttons that do absolutely horrendous damage, a lot of which can also be canceled into super as well. Gladius is terrifying to deal with. She has a really good command grab. She has just plus buttons for days. And she can just unironically do like 7,000 damage off of DP punishes and things like that. It's absolutely disgusting. But her close range frame data is not as good. She gets blown up in Oki situations really, really poorly because her defense sucks and she's not really able to force people off of her reliably. Especially if you just mix between grabs and lows. On top of that, she has to commit pretty hard to dealing with fireballs, which can make her one option for dealing with them reliably. Superman punch can just be DI'd, so she has to be really careful and sparing with it. Her defense sucks. She gets blown up by grabs really hard. Her anti-air game is very unreliable as well. A lot of them can regularly lose to other things. So her struggle with longer range gameplay, her absolutely atrocious defense, and unreliable anti-airs ultimately balance her to where I think she's fairly well balanced for the most part. But she's really scary to play against for sure. Speaking of damage demons, we get to Ryu. This is a character that got some nice buffs in the most recent patch where he has some more reliable damage output, and a lot of the stuff with Dinjin charges or with like all his Hashogeki setups, he's a lot better at forcing spacing traps that can be annoying for characters to deal with now. So he has some more close range stuff he can force people in that's good for him. He has a pretty good fireball, great DP, really strong damage output, but sometimes he just loses to characters with better fireball games, which can make him... In a lot of ways, he's like a zoner, but the characters that are zoners that are above him just do it better for the most part. Also, he's kind of reliant on drive rush, on like drive rush extensions to get good damage, because without it, a lot of characters will just get better at stuff than he will. He also doesn't necessarily have the best Oki off of a lot of his confirms as well, so he's not really the best at forcing corners. He gets out-zoned by a lot of the characters above him while trying to be a zoner himself. And it's not that he's really bad at anything. He just gets outclassed by a lot of characters above him. He's just solid all around though, and players like Ending Walker, Paladin, and others have definitely put in work with him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they put in more. But yeah, other characters are just similar strengths, but just overall higher highs. Which just kind of gets him like quasi-invalidated in the meta. He's definitely a solid character though. Alright, next up we'll probably end up with Kimberly. I'm inclined to put her a little higher than Aki right now, but I think she's pretty underrated. My opinion of her has definitely slowly gone up over time. She's a character that has some of the most annoying like long-range bursts in the game. She has some of the most annoying mental stack for just burst range from literally full screen. With a really good overhead, full screen lows, all her teleport shenanigans, all her run cancels. This character is very much a reaction check to fight against, but she gets blown up really hard by DPs. Fireballs can be kind of rough for her to deal with. Her damage output absolutely sucks, which for balance reasons is probably for the best. Her defense is also really poor too, so if you get her in the corner, she just struggles. While she might be able to force you in the corner really well off of almost anything, you can kind of do the same to her, and she's not really great at stopping you. So yeah, bad defense, no DP. She gets blown up a lot by other characters' DPs, and for the most part, she has kind of a lack of good things to do in short range as well. She has a good standing medium kick for drive rush cancels, but her footsies game is really not that great outside of that. She kind of just has to rely on that and just burst options, which if you're good at checking them, you can kind of just not even let her play the game sometimes, because a significant amount of her burst just straight up loses to you mashing jab as well. The problem is you have to make sure you're mashing jab in the right spots, because otherwise you can get blown up or counter hit for it, but good Kimberly players of course will do a good job at mixing that up and making it hard for you. So yeah, so she has a lot of really annoying highs, but plenty of lows as well. I think putting her in mid makes sense to me right now. Alright, Aki. So this character has, in my opinion, the single best burnout pressure in the entire game. She has surprisingly high damage off of a lot of things. She has a good drive rush fireball game. Just good long range game in general with fireball, all the whip stuff. Being able to get around other characters' projectiles with all the I forget what it's called, like coward crouch or whatever. I forget what it's called. But you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that thing. Sorry, I'm tired. I didn't sleep enough last night. So there's that. Her really good damage, surprisingly good range. She has good jump in options. a pretty decent command grab as well, and some pretty good pressure out of drive rush. The main thing is that her low range game outside of drive rush is not great. A lot of her buttons are a bit slow, so she kind of gets oppressed by drive rush characters as well. And she generally has to commit more resources to get really high damage combos than a lot of characters above her. Which means that Sinister Slide is what I'm looking for. Thank you. That's what it's called. Yeah, her reliance on playing a more mid-range game, getting blown up by drive rush, needing more time to set things up for her higher damage stuff, and a lot of unreliable anti-airs as well, makes it to where she has to be really, really careful. She gets blown up really hard, and also her main corner escape option being throw loopable means that she has to be absolutely terrified of throw loops. She has no good answers for dealing with them outside of just level 1 and level 3, I guess, which are very risky. And they also just lose to jab, so if you do like jab on her wake up, meaty jab, even if you throw it out and it hits, or would hit in a level 1, you can still just block in time. So she just has to be really terrified in the corner. She doesn't really have anything good there. So plenty of exploitable weaknesses, but some pretty good strengths too. I think she's a really cool character overall, and I wouldn't be surprised if in Season 2 they make her anti-airs more reliable, and then that might be enough to push her in the next tier, honestly. If she just wasn't getting blown up reliably by jumps so much. Alright, the next batch of characters. I think this is where things get a little bit smaller. I'm kind of leaning towards something like this. This is kind of what I'm feeling for the next tier. Where overall, I think that Lily has some surprisingly high highs. She has really good damage on a command grab. When she has wind stocks, she's able to just brute force approaches, and if she uses OD Spire, she can just go through projectiles as well, which makes her she's really good at slowing the game down. But a lot of her buttons are extremely exploitable to DI. She has to be really afraid of fireballs when she doesn't have stocks. If you just don't let her get wind stocks, she kind of sucks. And on top of that, even though she has some really high highs when she's playing her game, even when she is playing her game and forcing the 50-50 grab mix-ups, if she just guesses wrong and gets jumped, then things fall apart for her really quickly. She's very reliant on guessing right in 50-50s. And then if she just doesn't, things can fall apart for her really quickly. So I think her main problem is she's just a very fundamentally inconsistent character because of her reliance on 50-50s. And on top of that, she's just really linear. Those things I've mentioned, that's mostly what you have to think about when you fight her. Like, there's really not that much you have to think about. It's just she has a few really strong, annoying options, and that's kind of it. She also gets blown up in the corner like a lot of these other characters in the bottom half, so she has to worry about that too. Alright, next we end up with Gief. I personally put Gief slightly higher than Manon right now. He actually does pretty decently against some of the characters above him who don't have projectiles. Like, I think he does pretty okay against Cammy. He does pretty okay against Blanka and a lot of the other characters above him that kind of just have to scrap. Obviously, SPD is absolutely horrifying damage. His main problems are that his defense still sucks. He has no DP. His only real good reversal, if you can even call it that, is level 2, and it's extremely slow. It loses to so many like low commitment meaty options on wake up, but at least it also is very long range and beats fireballs as well, so it gives him some options. And a lot of his combos are lower damage than you'd expect for a character as slow as he is. So he's kind of reliant on raw SPD for really good damage, usually. Which, combined with how slow he is, his lack of fireball, lack of DP, and vulnerability to being crossed up because Lariat just doesn't hit cross-ups for some reason. I don't understand why he does the full spin in his... He does this full spin, but his arms behind him just don't exist for whatever reason. It's baffling. Honestly, for Season 2, I hope they let Larry hit cross-ups. I'm not sure what else they would do, but they could at least do that. Throw him a bone. But yeah, he's super slow. He doesn't really have great Oki in general. He has to drive rush for it, which... Having to drive rush just to have Oki on most of your stuff kind of sucks. But at least his damage off of raw hits is very good. He has situationally amazing damage off of like hard reads. And SPDs are obviously really annoying to deal with. His strengths are too high for him to be the worst in my opinion, but overall he's just... has relatively limited strengths and a lot of exploitable weaknesses. Which brings us to a similar camp as Manon, actually. The other main dedicated grappler of the game. Her damage output is probably a little bit better than Gief's off of regular non-grab combos. But she's kind of reliant on having higher metal counts to be able to really start scaring people. She's extremely vulnerable to fireballs and doesn't really have a good solution to them, even with meter. On top of that, she's just really slow. She's really vulnerable to drive reversal. If you just drive reversal when she does drive rush cancel stuff, she can't really do anything about it. And a lot of her buttons also just get pressed up close as well. Her anti-airs are fairly unreliable. She's slow. Her drive rush is really bad too. So she kind of just has to slowly walk people down and just try to brute force her way in, which is hard when a lot of the characters above have more range, better damage off of a lot of their combos, and also are just able to more effectively control the ground as well with better movement and better pokes. Yeah, she definitely needs some help for sure for Season 2. Although if she has 5 medals, her raw command grabs are absolutely horrifying. So she has at least that niche going for her, but it takes too long for her to become like a scary character. Will this tier list be a video? Yeah, why not? Alright. I'm not sure which I would put higher. I kind of lean towards putting Jamie higher. This character is pretty cool, but he is very reliant on getting lots of drinks, and if he doesn't get drinks, his damage output is really bad. He struggles a lot with fireballs. He's a character that has to commit a lot as well. His DP kind of sucks and has a much smaller hitbox than you'd expect, so sometimes he can just lose even trying to go for it in some stuff. He did get some recent buffs, yes, but I really don't think that they made him like a dramatically better character. If anything, at best, he might be like this now. Low-key, I'm kind of tempted to put Jamie here. You know what? I think I will, actually. I'll promote Jamie. Because he has gotten a little bit of results recently. Well, like, even just last night, Zaffarino got a top 3 in TNS, going mostly Jamie. You know, I'll promote him. He has a little bit more of a niche, but he just struggles in general to deal with fireballs. Zoners absolutely annihilate him. His damage output sucks, and while he ends up being a pretty good character once he gets all of his drinks, a lot of characters are pretty good characters from the rip, whereas he has to become one later, and is easily the worst character in the game for the first 2 drinks. Once he has 3 drinks and above, I think he's pretty good. But up until he has 2 drinks, he just... Can I put Honda in S tier for 2 seconds? Why not? Alright. Get down from there, Honda. You're gonna hurt yourself. But yeah, Jamie is a pretty flawed character, but his strengths are actually decent. He just gets blown up by too many archetypes of characters, and it takes too long for him to become a good character compared to other characters who are just good by default. But at least he can become a good character, unlike the final character we're going to talk about today. So, Honda is the epitome of a gimmick character. I think he blows. It's funny that he's pretty oppressive at lower levels of play, but once you start developing some solid counterplay to headbutt and butt slam, a lot of his pokes kind of suck. His damage output is not the best unless he fully commits to a lot of resources. He gets absolutely obliterated by fireballs. He's super linear, which makes him really hard to reach higher ranks with, because it's very hard to be subtle with this character because he just has a relatively small repertoire of things you have to think about. His poke game sucks. He gets obliterated by fireballs. Perfect parry is absolutely disgusting against this character and makes it to where headbutt is a struggle as well. A lot of his poke buttons are higher commitment and lower range than a lot of other characters who have to rely on poke buttons. And he gets absolutely obliterated in the corner as well. He gets destroyed by throws. They are extremely difficult for him to deal with. Yeah, his defense sucks, aside from a decent DP, but it still loses to a lot of stuff. He has to just be so afraid of grabs. And his anti-air game is okay, but kind of slow. So his defense sucks, aside from like when he can headbutt on reaction to some stuff, but this character is just very much a struggle character, but it's hard to buff him without making him really stupid. Because he's already a really silly character. I think the best thing they can do for Honda for Season 2 is make butt slam and headbutt worse. Like maybe make them like an extra -1 or 2 on block each. But then in exchange, they make him have a lot more like good pokes. Or maybe just straight up give him a new move. I don't know. I think they just need to make him a more complicated character. But in exchange, tone down headbutt and butt slam so that he doesn't just oppress everyone that isn't a master rank player. Because he would just... Honda will single-handedly kill the casual scene for this game if you make him notably better without nerfing headbutt and butt slam. A lot of people will just not want to play if Honda's on screen, which is the main problem with him. But yeah, either way, that about sums up my current perspective of this game's metagame. Obviously, I could be wrong on a lot of things. I have a lot less confidence in the bottom half of the cast, especially. I'm pretty confident in my top 10, although even in top 10, you could switch a lot of characters around, and I think it'd be reasonable. But Luke is definitely number 1. These 3 are definitely top 4 in my opinion, but you could switch them in any order, and it'd be fine. Ryu is not better than Aki. Yeah, that's the thing. This tier in particular is very loosely ordered. Like, I feel confident about this ordering in this tier, and I feel confident about this tier for the most part. But this middle tier right here, you could definitely put Aki higher, and I wouldn't disagree. You know? I wouldn't put her in the next tier, but I think she's fairly interchangeable with, like, any of Marisa, Ryu, and Kimberly. You know, just because she has some more recent results, we'll put her like that. We'll put her like that for now. I could see her overriding Marisa as well, but we'll see, we'll see. Either way, agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below, guys, and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to keep up with more Street Fighter stuff in general, because I want to make a lot more content. So, yeah, that's about it. Alright, that's gonna be a super easy YouTube video for later. B tier is one buff away from being Juri level. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it'll be a fairly simple YouTube video, just copy paste, but you know, might as well do it. It really just needs like a thumbnail and then we're good, I think. Alright, I think that's gonna be it for me for streaming for now. I'll be back at 6 per usual. I think we're gonna do one more Smash stream this week because I do want to get a little bit of practice for Rock the Winds. Rock the Winds is a tournament that I'm going to be doing this weekend, and I am entering Smash doubles, so I'd like to get a little more practice, I think. Alright, we will raid... We'll raid Justin Wong, because why not? Alright, see you guys in like an hour and a half for another stream, alright? Take care, everyone. Be back fairly soon.